And we are back at it here with another In Space episode here. I am your host, as always, Chris Connor. We got my dog, uh, Lito here, Boot Crew contributor, and we have a special guest, who I hardly ever see make guest appearances. I feel special. Locked on Pelicans, his own legend, maniac, recording 8 shows a week. Jake Madison, what's up, man?
Not too much. I'm happy to be on here with you. I've tried to tone down like the appearances and other podcast hits and stuff this year, but when you texted me, I was like, yeah, whenever you need me, I'm on.
Oh man, no, it is, man. Because look, like I've it's so interesting, like in the space that I'm in now, no pun intended, that I see so many people that I remember like watching from afar, like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and the progression of so many people and how they've either inspired me or they inspired someone that I know. But Jake, what's interesting about you, and at some point we're going to talk about the Pelicans, but this show is a little different. I want to know how you got here, right? We've talked about it. You and I talked about it, but to get to a point to where like your shows are doing great, you're doing them daily. Like there was a time I remember when I think I was offered like Locked On Saints, and I was just like, no, I was like the reward. It's not worth putting in all that time. You want me to do these daily? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to. But you've made it work. You've done a great job with it. And I mean, your YouTube presence is amazing. It's inspiration. And we've had a lot of talks, beyond, man. But kind of walk Lito back to how you got here. What was the start? What was next? Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been doing this for like 12 years, so it's not the easiest thing to sum up, but I'll try and do like the quick version of this. So, like one of the things that I've been really lucky with my timing on this. When I started covering the team, it was 2010, 2011, kind of when like internet blogs, sports blogs were like taking off and kind of right before everyone had one of those. So I got in at just the right time on that sort of thing. Because if you try to take my path today, it would be nearly impossible and so much harder. So I keep that in mind, that if people are looking for kind of like my path to emulate it, it's not always going to go that way, just because I'm lucky in that sense. So I started, by buying season tickets to the team with like the first real job I had out of college, had some disposable income. So I bought season tickets. I've always been a big basketball guy my whole life. And then at one point, having a writing background, I just kind of said like, screw it. I should be writing about the team. I was looking at all these sports blogs and said like, I should try my hand at that. And so I reached out to like a couple of different places, and one of them brought me on. It was then the fan-sided one called Swarm and Sting, and I worked for free. That's kind of what you have to do, unfortunately, in this industry. And it sucks to really get your foot in the door. And there's a million people that would be happy to replace you and work for free. And it also helps that, to be honest, there's like white privilege involved in this too. I can send an email that's, well crafted, and people probably think I'm a safer hire than other people would be. And I never needed this to make money. I wasn't, supporting myself or my family. My family's not loaded or super rich, but if I ever needed to buy groceries, they could probably spot me a couple of dollars to be able to do it. So it allowed me to spend my free time on improving and being a good at the time blogger. I then got picked up by a bigger blog. From there, after putting in a bunch of work, Locked On came calling, and I kind of saw the beginning of the vision of what they were doing with the network here. And I've basically been there since the beginning, and over time while blogging, I would do radio hits. I credit Fletcher Mackel a lot. Actually, I know people like to joke about him, but I think he's been an important influence on me in getting to where I am today. So I give him a lot of credit for that, bringing me on TV, which makes me, it kind of legitimizes you in a way, even if I don't think it's like a be all end all thing. And from there, Locked On reached out, hearing me on the radio, going on podcasts as a guest, and asked me if I was interested in hosting the show. And it was one of those things that, as you said, right? Locked On Saints daily. It's a lot of work. And there were times when I was working for very little money. There'd be times when it was a $7 check, a $5 check for a month of shows. But if you see the vision in it long term and grind away at it and keep putting it out, Locked On Pelicans is over 1,300 episodes. If you're good, it'll find an audience. It'll start to take off. And so moving it onto YouTube and being able to kind of get into that space, and again, grinding, plugging away, doing the show, it does well. I can tell you right now, Locked On Pelicans, of all of our NBA shows for Locked On YouTube, and we have over 200 something shows total, is fifth in terms of the NBA by views. It's beating out shows like the Rockets, the Warriors, the Heat, the Celtics even. The Lakers are one ahead of the Pelican show here. So even in a small market, and what New Orleans is the first or second smallest in the NBA, it's still able to beat people out because of the grinding and from kind of realizing what like this very passionate fan base wants.
And Jake, and it's interesting. A lot of what you said is, especially in taking that role, I think about it now, like, and what I've learned is it's really not sure, you want the position or the situation. Once you get to a certain, I guess, standing, you want it to be worth your time and what you're putting into. You want the right resources around you and the right people. Of course, all of that matters. But a lot of times, the person makes the situation, right? The work ethic that they put in behind it and, how they handle it. Because I remember, like, I brought up the Locked On Saints, but look at what Ross Jackson is doing. He's made it. He's made it everything. He's made it, very, very similar to what you're doing. Ross is a superstar in that lane, and I'm sure he had his doubts about, damn, where is this going to go?
Yeah, he is one of my favorite people. He's recently moved to New Orleans full time, so we hang out a lot, and I absolutely love that dude and think what he's doing is amazing. And to be honest, you should get him on the show because his story is unbelievable about everything, and I'll let him tell that. He's been on that show for about 3 years now, I think, maybe a little bit longer than that. But they had other hosts of that show, and some of them are names that people would have heard of and known who quit and didn't want to put in the work on that sort of thing and weren't able to do it. And it shows you how important this is. Like the number one thing I tell people when they ask me for advice in this space is you got to put in the work and you've got to get better as you go with it. Like my first couple shows, probably the first 2 years of Locked On Pelicans, I fucking sucked at that, right? Like I was awful at it. And I don't want to even go back and listen to those things. You get better as you go on. You put in the grind. You do the work. You see so many people that want to get into this space and kind of be like a Twitter celebrity. And that's not something that, like, if you want that, that's totally cool. I have no problem with that. Seeing your followers go up gives you endorphins. It makes you feel good. There's something to be said for that. But if you want to translate it into something else, you have to do the work is like the number one thing I keep telling people. And Ross is one of those people who came in and took a show that people had a bunch of different hosts and no one could really figure out and be committed to, and then went in and kills it. Like, I think he is an up and coming star. And I've heard of people offering him other jobs locally, like big time jobs, and he keeps turning them down because he's turned that show in a sense into a machine and it's making lots of money, which is awesome for him and a credit to a dude who's willing to do the work for all of that.
Chris, you have something? Okay, I just want to say, the first time I met you, I just want to give you your flowers. The first time I met you, you were like, well, I'm not even gonna tell that story, Jake.
I'm already laughing.
I'm not even gonna tell that story. I was just gonna say you were super inviting. You know what I'm saying? Like you were cool. You gave me advice. Like you know what I'm saying? You were welcoming and like that's cool as hell. Because a lot of times, when you're trying to get into something, people aren't always as like, they won't wrap their arms around you. It's like, yo, you go over there and you figure that shit out yourself. But like, I just want to say, yo, I think I told you this to your face, man. The fact that you can get on your pod or your platform and you can literally just talk to yourself, dude. That is, I don't think people realize how fucking hard that is.
Oh, trust me, I know.
Lito, tell a story about that day that we was at the studio and you
oh my God. Jake, listen. me and Chris were doing a pod and I don't remember what it was, but Trey Murphy's dad ends up calling Chris. So Chris looks at me and he's like, what do I do? I'm like, answer the phone. So he sneaks out, and it's just like me in front of the camera, and it's so crazy. I'm telling the story because I literally was thinking about you while I was doing it. I was like, "Yo," so the camera's in front of me, and I'm just like, I'm just spewing shit out. I'm like, like God saves, He saves the children. Like believe in yourself, everybody, each one teach one. And it's like I did that shit for like 5 minutes, man. And then I just cut the camera off. And Chris came back after that, and he was like, you want to run it?" I was like, "Man, that shit over. It's gone." But my question was, or I guess my statement and a question. Like, I think, can you just talk to people who just think that, just sitting in front of a camera, talking to yourself is like relatively easy. And the other question I had was, can you talk about how, I know you built a platform and then you moved over to YouTube, but like, can you talk about how difficult that is because those things don't always, cross-reference?
Yeah, so there's three things I want to hit on from what you said. I'll tackle like the YouTube one first. We'll go reverse order here. Platforms don't always translate to one another. And, it's kind of with like a Twitter following, right? You might have 10,000 Twitter followers, but it's not going to necessarily translate over. I was talking about this on Twitter today from like a different industry with this to another medium. So you've got to work hard at each one. And, moving to YouTube, I was originally like not happy or thrilled to do it. I actually gave our network a lot of pushback on all of that, which, oh boy, was I wrong on that one. Because, I did my show and it goes to kind of the talking to yourself. Whenever you're doing these type of shows or a podcast or single host show, you got to plan it out. Like I do a lot of prep work on the beginning of it. I know what each segment is. I know the point of each segment of the 3 that I do daily. I usually write out my open first and then kind of read it off of like a sticky note more or less on my computer here to be able to make it as good as possible. You've got to put in, it goes back to what I said earlier, you got to put in the work on all of this. And it's not simply let me turn the camera on, hit record, and we'll see what happens. You're going to lose people if you're kind of meandering like that. So I can talk for 20 to 30 minutes because I've already basically done the show before I hit record. There's a really famous quote from Orson Welles when he was filming the movie Citizen Kane, and they were asking him if he was like scared about all of this. And he's like, we already made the movie. We just need to film it now, right? For all the prep work that goes into that sort of thing. So that really helps me is, throughout the day, I'm thinking of what's the show going to be? What's kind of the point of the show? What's the point of each segment? What's the takeaway here? What am I trying to convey to the audience? And so all that prep work makes it easy to do the show for the most part at that point in time. But when I would do the podcast, I could take breaks. I could record a segment and I could stop. And then if it was bad, I could re-record it if I needed to. If I said something wrong, I could edit it and cut it. And I was taking breaks and kind of doing everything in piecemeal. And then in YouTube, I now have to basically one take things because I don't want to spend 2 hours a day editing a video, which is a much different thing than just editing the audio on something and takes so much more time. So it's taught me to just learn how to kind of one take things and just be less of a perfectionist, which I actually think is a good thing. And it's okay if you screw up a little bit in your show and things like that. So it's taught me just kind of how to do it all in one take and just forced me to be better and not to rely on some of the crutches I think I had before with everything. And I think it works well for YouTube with all of that. So it was a bit of an adjustment. It added a little bit more time to my plate and I knew I couldn't screw up. Otherwise I'm spending an hour editing a video, which happens on occasion. Not a fun process sometimes at like 1 a.m. after games, but it just forces you to be better and grow as a podcaster, producer, content creator, whatever you want to use with all of that. And it's forced me to think about it differently. When you're on camera, you need a little bit of personality to the show. And I don't think my show's funny or necessarily has a ton of personality, but I've learned how to almost be like a character on the screen. And that's kind of how I think of myself when I do the show. Like, I don't think of that's like the authentic Jake necessarily. Like, I'm acting a little bit. You're hamming things up for the camera a little bit to keep the audience more engaged. Ross Jackson recommends people take improv lessons and things like that. If you're interviewing a player or you're out on the field doing something, right, you don't know what's going to come up and being able to react in the moment. Or if you're interviewing a guest and they say something interesting, are you able to pick up on that and run with it? So improv classes are really important to that sort of side of things too. I study other people. I've studied guys like Colin Cowherd, who does a single host show. I've looked at other single hosts on how they kind of do things and have tried to figure out what I like and what would work for me and put that into play as I'm kind of playing this character in a sense. You know, there's times when I'm almost like talking to someone or I'm talking to a player. It often has been me yelling at David Griffin at times, being like, what are you doing, Griff? Right. And there's kind of like an acting to it and how you do things. And I think that engages the audience. And I never had to do that before when you didn't see me on camera and it was just me recording and you didn't have that visual side to things. And then I just want to say, I appreciate you saying that I was welcoming. I try and do that for like most people here. You know, I'm super supportive of Chris and everything y'all do over at Boot Crew. Anyone who reaches out, like my DMs are open. I give you advice. I had someone asking me the other day in there, like, how do I make my blog successful? How do I make my YouTube show successful? And I'm happy to share all of that because I think some people view it as like competition and they get scared. Trust me, I can tell you all of the other Pelicans content creators, you know, when I tweeted out the other day that Locked On Pelicans hit 6,000 subscribers on YouTube, don't ever retweet anything positive about my show, even though I'm friends with them in real life. And I wonder if there's a degree of jealousy there or something along those lines, and that's fine. But I know they don't support my show, and I've learned that, and I kind of accept that. I'm different. Whenever people are doing well, I want everyone to do well. And I really try and, you know, be welcoming. There's been so many different beat writers that have moved to New Orleans. And I reach out to literally every single one of them. And I'm like, hey, if you ever need anything, I'm here. Before they've even met me or probably like know who I am. I don't know. I just want people to do well because I don't see it as a threat to me. I think it's kind of like the idea of like a rising tide here. And and I'll always support people who kind of do it the right way, not making up, say, a rumored trade or something like that and trying to claim sources on it to try and gain clout and kind of get into this space. Put in the grind, work hard, and I'll be there to support you and go on your show. I went on a show the other day that got like 50 views, right? They went 45 minutes, which is like 3 of my shows total, right? It's a time commitment at times, but I'm happy to do it to support other people because people, you know, kind of extended that arm to me in the beginning too.
It's really
just sounds like you're a good human. That's all I have from that.
I wouldn't say that necessarily, but I try, you know.
Good enough, man. I've like, and I remember when I like first started with the Bird Rights, it was just, it felt like it was like pulling teeth trying to get people to, you know, to assist in any kind of way. So when you have people like, you know, in the beginning, like even when I was, because people don't remember, I started out with like the Pelican Debrief. I was just mainly writing. I was just trying to find out what was going to work for me. But when you get people from, you know, the people that have helped me like along the way, you don't forget those things because you are going to, it's always a balance. You'll find 4 people that, you know, that'll help you out, and there'll be 5 or 6 that won't respond to your DM or won't support what you're doing, you know, like you said, because of looking at it in regards to competition,
whatever reason, right? Yeah.
It's just the help at the end of the day, and that's one of the things I respect about you because it's genuine. It's 100% genuine, and that's the way it's supposed to be, bro. Like you can't. We all had humble beginnings in one way or another. I couldn't have told you 2 years ago I'd be having a show or people will want to hear what I had to say that much. I mean, anybody that could happen to anybody if they put in the work.
Yeah, it's kind of like knowing your place in a sense and kind of understanding like what all of this is. Like most of us do this part-time in some capacity. Like this isn't my full-time job. So, you know, I'm not looking at it in like, I got to kill off my competition so that I can make it. And I don't think that works either, right? People have bandwidth, people listen to multiple shows. So it's not like they can only listen to Locked On Pelicans. Otherwise I'm a failure. Listen to my show, listen to other shows. It's going to be okay. The more you care about a team and the more interested you are in them, you're going to have a greater bandwidth to consume more content. So let's make sure that content's good because look, Lord knows we've been in a position where the content around the Pelicans, right when I was starting with the blogging, was absolutely terrible. Yeah. The newspaper of record didn't understand basketball, didn't care about basketball, and you still get it to a certain degree. So I kind of look at this as it's just awesome, right? And if, look, my show's not for everyone. I've had people come in. Look, I get it. I'm kind of like another at times bland white dude, and it doesn't speak to people, and that's completely fine. I get that. So if there's another show that does speak to them that's not, you know, the exact same as mine, I want to make that successful so that everyone can kind of find the people they like and listen to the content they like. We had that whole crap with Locked On, another show, dealing with that the other day. I hate what that host said and all of that stuff, because it's not like the take that I have with everything. And it's just like, let everyone do their thing. People will find the ones that work for them, and, you know, things rise up, things don't, but there's no reason not to help those other ones.
So, and it's funny because I remember before I officially started with Boo Crew, and Jake had told me like months before this had happened, he was like, one day I'm gonna reach out to you about, you know, if I'm not available or whatever, for you to come on and be a host. But I didn't really realize what that meant. I was like, all right, you know, like cool, like, you know, whatever. So then, you know, he finally hit me, and I was like, fuck. It's one of those things to where I know I could do it, but I was scared as hell. I was fearful of like what could go wrong, but I was totally okay with that. And,
that was fun, by the way. Your text to me of like, what do I do? Here's what I'm thinking. And I'm like, let me give you a little bit of advice here. Like, do your thing, but let me help you structure it. And at the end, you're like, oh, yeah, that was different than what I thought.
My anxiety was through the fucking roof. I know I talked to Lito that day. I know Antonio Daniels hit me up, who I don't know if he's still part of the Locked On. You know,
he is. He still works for Locked On. Big friend of my show, too. Like,
yeah. He hit me with like, yo, brother, if you need help, you know, it's fine. I was like, yeah, I might, because I don't know what I'm doing here. I was like, and it was something to where it was a big learning experience, but what it taught me, and it's kind of like what I already knew. And I think, you know, myself and Lito have learned this in our own way. Still kind of relatively being new to this side of things, where fear is okay. It's a part of it. You are gonna suck. And that's my biggest advice to anybody that wants to. You are going to be terrible at some point. You're going to be trash. Your energy is going to be off. You're going to say something stupid. You're going to do something stupid. You got to embrace that and move the fuck on, because you can't run away from it.
It's like watching game film, right? Like, if I've had bad shows in the past, I hate hearing the sound of my own voice, so I don't go back and like watch and listen to things that I'm on. Yep. But I know when I'm bad and when I'm good and what I can do differently, and I'm really open to like constructive criticism and coaching. Like, even David Locke, who runs our network, he's the radio voice for the Utah Jazz. A couple of years ago, he pulled me aside at a game in front of other like writers and was like, come talk to me in private, and was like, I need you to be better on your prep work. Like, your show was a little sloppy today. You said you weren't sure if this guy was playing or not when they had already ruled him out, and you completely missed that. And it was kind of like an eye-opening thing for me. Like, my boss basically being like, you got to be better. And it's like, okay, I'm not fired here. That's good, but I'll be better then. And you go out and do it, as long as you don't say something like truly offensive, right? Which you almost have to try hard to do. When we see those clips go viral, those people are trying hard to make that point on those things. It's not usually just like a complete accident. You'll be fine. If it's bad, don't worry, get through it, get better, learn from it, and go out and make the show better, even if it's a small increment next time. And eventually you will get there.
I mean, from what both of you have just said, is like, honestly, you know, from, you know, starting, I remember, you know, just doing my first pod, and then, you know, having to go back to those episodes. Like, it's cringe. It's so much cringe. Like, I hate it.
Yeah, it's awful, right?
Like, I am with you. I do not like the sound. I do not like hearing my recorded voice. It's like one of the worst things on earth. Like, I wish that, you know, I could just fast forward past my parts and listen to the pods, because I generally think they're good. But I think that's true, man. And so let me ask you this: with your boss pulling you aside, right? How did that? Obviously, you said you weren't fired, so you know we know how that turned out. But like, how did that affect your confidence at all, or did it make you? Oh, okay, go ahead.
No, I mean, so like, yeah, right. Like, that's never fun. That's never fun for your boss to be like, "Hey, your show wasn't too good today," you know. But it's coming from like a positive place. This is a guy that wants me to succeed, that is invested in helping me succeed, which is something I think Locked On does really well versus networks, not yours, but other networks. It's like there isn't coaching on how to make you better on these sorts of things. Chris is smiling because he gets it, but you know, that's what I think is great when everyone's kind of like invested in your success. Like, find those people and stick with those people who will help make you better and like grow with them. So David was in town, you know, for the home opener for the Pelicans with the Jazz being there, and we had lunch together, and he basically said, my show, like, I don't mean this like pat myself on the back. He's just like, your show is like a perfect example of what I want all of our shows on our whole network to be. And I've told him, you know, like, that's that's from you coaching me up, the support you've all invested in me to make me as good as possible. And I listened to that, and I've tried really hard. He basically was like, I want all of our shows to be exactly like yours, which works for our network, doesn't work for everyone, right? Like, don't go take the structure of my show and think it'll translate all around. It works for what we're doing with what we want kind of the goal of our shows to be. But it's never fun to hear that. But once you realize it's always coming from like a good place of like, you got to be better, you got to work on this. Okay, I'll do that. I wasn't worried about getting fired right there in the moment, but you listen to where you have gaps in what you got to do, and you work to fill those.
Jake, I have a question for you. So, like, just listening to you, you're like you said, your story is man interesting. Just from how you started buying tickets to where you are now. Like, obviously, I don't know if you ever saw yourself being the voice of a basketball team, but go ahead.
No.
So let me ask you, just moving forward, like, where would you say you see yourself in maybe the next 5 to 10 years?
So I don't know. I'm a believer in like also be happy in the moment, and you don't always need to like continuously try and go for the next thing. I don't think my show is perfect. I still think there's a lot of growth for my show to do. So I'm happy to just keep doing what I'm doing and incrementally getting it to another spot, right? That's something I talked to our network about. We're like, what if we introduce all these new shows and do all this new stuff? What if we just focus on being the best we can at what we're doing right now? Because we're not 100%. So I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years with it. I don't know if, I'd like to think I'll still be hosting Locked On Pelicans, certainly, but it goes to something Chris said in the beginning of like, you want your time to be worth it, and that time becomes more valuable the older you get. I'm 36. When I started doing this, I was in my like mid 20s, 24, something like that. And my time to me at that point was probably kind of worthless, to be perfectly honest. And now it's not, as your priorities change. And I'm lucky I don't have kids. I'm not lucky that I don't have kids. I don't have kids. I don't particularly want kids, but it gives me all that free time to do it. You get what I'm saying there? Yeah. So that allows me to do a lot of these sorts of things. So I don't necessarily see things changing. Like, I'm pretty happy the trajectory the show's on. To be honest and upfront, it's making very good money. So that's a big part of why I keep doing it. If it wasn't, I don't know if I would still be doing this at this point in time because of the value of your time and things like that. So I don't know where it is in 5 years. I'm still always in awe of where it is today. So I'll take that for the time being. I'd like to do maybe more official things with the Pelicans. I've worked with them before. I hosted their official Twitch show. Chris has been on their podcast. I haven't. Hint, hint, whoever's maybe listening to this sort of thing. So like that would be cool. And they trust me and they've worked with me and we've had talks about other stuff. So we'll see where that goes. Like, that would be a cool thing. I think there's some sort of prestige attached with like officially working with the team in some capacity.
I just want to say Jake Madison does not hate kids.
Yeah, I was like, oh boy, let me not say that I'm lucky that I don't have kids, because that sounds terrible. My free time is not taken up with kids, so it allows me to do more things like this. Let me say it that way.
Which neither of us have kids yet. But no, I really like the point too about like your circle, right? And it might not be a circle. It could just be a line. It could just be like just one person that you have, right? Mm-hmm. But I won't forget this. A couple weeks ago, Lito called me, and it was like a random Wednesday. He didn't even know I was off work. He just randomly called me, and in the most polite but non-polite way, he told me I needed to work. Like that was like basically like, what are you doing? Like what are you doing? You need to record. Like, stop. Don't wait for the season. Be more than just the Spaces guy. And I had never. I wasn't thinking about being that, but I was being lazy. I was just waiting. And that was like a big wake up call to me in a sense, because it was like, damn, like he's right. And I just sat there. And my girl was right next to me, and she just was like, just shaking her head because. I couldn't say anything. I had to take what he was saying because it was 100. We did a show later on that day, and pretty much ever since then, I've been trying to be like, all right, let me find my way. This is like, Jake, you're the second show of today. I haven't done that in a very long time. So that was just that was big, but you need it from the right people that genuinely want you to succeed.
Yeah, sometimes like a slap in the face isn't a bad thing, right? Like those wake up calls you get are important. One of the things that I'm really proud of with my show is it's really consistent. Maybe it's not the best show I've ever put out in a day, but you're gonna have a show, and that's important, and people expect that. And if you want your show to be successful, this is for anybody. You got to be there for them. Your show can't be successful if you don't have a show out. And if you call yourself a podcaster, then you've got a podcast, right? If you're a blogger, you've got to write. Otherwise you're just a Twitter person, which is also fine. Like I don't want to sound like I'm putting that down, but I don't think that's going to accomplish what a lot of people want other than just seeing their followers going up and being happy with that. I've seen a lot of people that are just like, I want to just talk about the team. Okay, do that. Then don't ask me how to make money doing this, because it's not on Twitter. It's in other mediums, no matter what Elon Musk is saying right now with all of that stuff, right? Like it's not there, and that doesn't translate. So that's one of the things that I think people fall into a trap of, are like, I'll tweet and I'll put things out there, and that's great. You can have fun with that. I've met so many wonderful people through that. But if you want to make money, it's not there. If you want to be a podcaster, you don't podcast on Twitter. If you want to be a writer, you don't, I guess you kind of write on Twitter, but it's all of those sorts of things. So it's doing the work. I think a lot of people say they want to be like a personality or a podcaster or a writer, and they say that because they like the idea of it, but they don't actually want to put in the work to do all of that.
I think everything you said is important just now, because I mean, in the same way, Chris said that I gave him a proverbial slap in the face. I mean, he did it to me. Like he sent me a DM and asked me if I wanted to write. Like I was just posting shit on Twitter, and like you said, I can literally say that you cannot make money just posting tweets. Like you have to and like once you start doing that, but in the same breath, if somebody sees you're interested in something and they can, push you along that way. I think the biggest thing though is, right, like the biggest thing is, y'all have all said it, but using fear to your advantage. Nothing wrong with being scared. Like,
it's okay.
It's okay. I think every time, I say every time I would play basketball, or I would step on the court, I'd be nervous, not scared that I'm not good enough, but I just want to put my best foot forward. I want to do the best I can. And the other thing is, like, you'll have people, it doesn't matter what you do. Whether you're right, you could be great or you could be terrible. People are going to talk about you either way. They're going to talk shit about you. They're going to say things. You know what I'm saying? So it really doesn't matter, because those people are literally just on the sideline. They're not creating the content.
It's also how you improve, right? Like, you're never going to step in fully formed. You're never going to step in and be perfect unless you're coming from like a different medium where you've already done all the work, and then it just translates right on over, right? Like if you're a TV sports anchor, you can probably step in and be pretty good on a podcast. But if that's not you, like, it takes a while to kind of figure out what works. It took me, years to kind of figure out the right flow for Locked On Pelicans on how I do a post-game show. How do you turn, I used to do, it's 3 segments a day. And after a game, I would just talk about that game for one segment. Then I would have to come up with 2 others. And it's like, oh wait, let me tease this out to be the whole show, let's say, and focus on that and get into some of these like gritty details with things. It takes a while to figure that out. And there've been shows that have been complete busts that I've done. Even now when I try different things, they fail, or one will work. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to use that, and I'll know, and I'll keep going. And look, there's haters everywhere, right? No matter what you do, there are going to be people that dislike you for whatever reason. It sucks. It hurts at times. It can be dangerous at times too, frankly, but you got to let it go and just kind of focus on going your way. And it's kind of like, screw what other people think if the majority of the people are finding it and it's working.
Agreed. All right. So I can't let you go, Jake, without talking about something Pelicans related to the team that is currently on the floor. Give me a couple of the things that you've been, I guess, most pleased about, or that you find the most interesting about the team's start. I mean, the Lakers game tomorrow, and we know how crazy that's going to be. It always is, but. Yeah, man. I mean, what do you think about the start that the Pelicans are off to, and what have you found interesting?
Yeah, look, 4-2 is fantastic. It took them 21 games to win 4 games last year. This is like quite a turnaround to be able to do it in 6, and really speaks to a lot of things going on well with the team. The starters have been good. Your heavy hitters in Zion, BI, and CJ, I think, have all been really good, even if some have been out of the lineup. And the depth, I think, is one of the more interesting things. And I'll pose this question to both of you as well. I've seen a lot of people say that they think this team is the deepest in the league, and I actually don't know if I agree with that. I think this team is deep, but it's deep with the right role players that work around the core guys. I don't necessarily know if I trust all of these guys to be like next man up if 4 starters go down. We kind of saw the limitations of that in the Suns game, I think. But these role players in the roles that they do, and I listened to the show when Larry Nance came on with all y'all and was talking about how role player is not a dirty word or a dirty thing to have here, right? They're really good at what they do, and they slot around these core guys perfectly. And I think seeing that is one of the most interesting things to me, because what they're doing with the rotations, right? Keeping BI out there, subbing Zion and CJ off, putting in the right role players around him. Then he goes off and Zion and CJ come on and they got the right role players around them. It's working in a way that, I don't know if they need like a 6-man off the bench. I know everyone kind of loves Jordan Clarkson, and maybe, the idea of a 20-point per game scorer off the bench sounds awesome. I don't know if this team needs that necessarily with the depth of the role players they have on this roster.
I'm with you, Jake. It's a tough question every time I hear it, because I'm like, I think context matters. I think they are what you said about the kind of role players and how they mesh together, and that goes into the conversation about how close of a group that this is. How good Willie is, I think, of bringing, of understanding people and personnel and bringing these guys together to have them play hard for each other. There are some other teams out there. I think Memphis is one of those teams. I think the Clippers eventually will get their act together and they'll be one of those teams. But, maybe Philly will be one of those teams. I like a lot of what they have there on their squad. I think we got to see more teams, I guess, do without, and how they are able to still find a way to persevere before we make that discovery. But even the fact that we can even pose this question, and we've been watching this damn franchise since they have joined the city of New Orleans, is good enough for me. They don't have to be the deepest, but if this team is in the top 5 or top 10, that's leaps and bounds better of what I've been used to, or what I thought I would accept. Lito?
Yeah, this is just so much better than what we were expecting, and how things have historically gone here with this team. And I think kind of keeping some of that in mind, it feels like they're playing with house money at certain times here, where it's like, this is just great. We don't normally get to be this happy to start the year historically with what this team does. So it's kind of like what I've been telling people a lot. It's like, enjoy the ride. There's going to be some downs along with the ups that we're seeing right now. Like, they're going to hit a 3-game losing streak at some point, and it'll feel like the sky is falling, but it'll actually be okay when you're kind of putting it into the context of everything they're doing. And all of this still does feel pretty sustainable, and I think that's important as well to really keep in mind here. It looks like this will continue years in the future with the guys locked up, them kind of building the right way, David Griffin finding the way with this team after a rocky couple of years, but really nailing it these past 2. And, I think that's big. It's not just going to be like a 1-year thing, hopefully, where it's like, oh, look at how good they are. It seems that you've got, a pipeline of young talent in these guys too. They're really developing internally, guys. Trey's certainly taken a leap this year. They've had a lot of success the past 3 years with undrafted 2-way contracts in, Kenrich Williams, Najee Marshall, Jose Alvarado. Who knows what we'll see with like Sebron this year, let's say. So I think it's been just fun to see. And I think seeing it kind of be so homegrown, not trading always for a lot of these guys. They brought in CJ, right? It feels like BI is kind of a homegrown player here because he kind of grew up before our eyes making an all-star in New Orleans. I think it just invites so much investment from the city and the region to kind of follow these guys and feel like they're invested in their trajectory and their future, that it's just made it a real fun fan base to be a part of.
Lito?
I don't know if they're the deepest team in the league. I still feel like Golden State. I feel like Boston. I feel like the Clippers you still got to get, because they haven't had any, continuity with their roster. But and honestly, I know this is probably a sleeper team, but I feel like Detroit is a very deep team also.
They're hard out, right? Like they fight hard. There's a lot of young talent there. Cade Cunningham the past week has looked like a superstar and really living up to that number one pick billing. Like, yeah, I think they're deep, right? I just don't know if you would take some of these guys and be like, they're starters all around the league. I think they're just really, 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 really good role players that work. Some of them would be. I think Trey could start on a number of teams, but I don't know if necessarily if Jose would, but he's perfect in his role here. And that I think does make you deep in a sense.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think, I think continuity has, it doesn't matter how deep your team is if you don't have those players available. You know what I'm saying? So AD says something very often with the whole be a star in your role approach. And I think that's kind of the mind state it feels like the Pelicans have taken on. But I just wanted to say, so from, when you started to like where you are now, where the team is now, like it's been a total 180, right? What would you say is has been the most exciting time for you like thus far?
Yeah, it's the community like really coming together. And I think this is why I think Chris is like a future superstar here with his cult-like ability to draw people into those spaces and everything, even when the team was bad, right? There have been times when people have rallied around this team, but it's kind of felt like flash in a pan. They were good, so let's go to the playoff games. Let's kind of pay attention to them. And then the team kind of like falls on their face the next year, and we go through this whole process of rebuilding again. But there was a collective moment last year, and Chris, I've told you this a lot before, where it seems like the fan base really came together and basically gave like the middle finger to everyone who was against this team. There was like a collective FU to everyone outside who was kind of belittling the franchise in a sense. I think that moment really, really brought people together in a way that will continue on in the future through good or bad. People, as Chris loves to say, finally started like really representing the New Orleans on the front of the jersey here. And we're like, okay, if you say this stupid crap about this team that's factually wrong, like we're going to come at you for it, which is what the city can definitely do. And I think seeing the fan base come together like that in a way that they never really had before is awesome. That's one of the things I love about being involved in this is the community aspect of it. I have lifelong friends that I would have met otherwise from this. I was just at Mason Ginsburg's like baby shower, right? And I met him literally because we knew each other on Twitter and interacted on Twitter. Then we met in person. It was like, oh, we get along really well. This dude's awesome, right? I get excited when Chris is coming into town before we start recording. He's telling me how long he's going to be in town for some of these games. And I'm like, let's hang out, dude, right? Lito, you can step on my shoes again here. And so... So like I love that aspect of things, right? It's really fun to be able to walk around the city or walk around the arena and like know people, even if it wasn't me on a show, but being just involved with the fan group, knowing the other fans that I see at watch parties that I interact with on Twitter, and that sense of belonging and sense of community is like really special, like truly special, that I think actually is something that's more achievable in a small market like New Orleans than it would be in a place like Los Angeles where everyone's spread out or there's more people not involved in that community going to games, right? So you're able to really accomplish that here, and you wouldn't necessarily be able to do that in another place. And I think that's something that makes this truly special. And it took last year to really get to that point.
All right, Jake. Well, I definitely appreciate you, man, coming on here. This was fun. It was a great show. You have. I didn't know you had energy at 7:20 to have the same voice that you have on your show. But shout out to you, man. Lito, I appreciate you.
As always.
Yeah. I will let Jake get out of here and get back to his regular life. Y'all, please tune in to everything that's happening with Locked On Pelicans. There are 4 or 5 shows throughout the week, and that just depends on what kind of mood he's in. He might put in more, but the show's doing great. So I wanted to give you your flowers, man. I appreciate your story, and as always, we will talk soon. And I will see you when I'm in the city.
I can't wait. Thanks for having me on, you guys.
No doubt, man.
Not a problem.
Next time I will not step on your shoes after you buy me a beer.
It's okay. Crazy, man. You got to buy me the beer next time.
I owe you a beer for sure.
All right, y'all. You were in space. We out. The show wants to. Does the